Well guys, I've never seen something like this before. Just working on Craftsman. This is like a 5 or I don't know, 6 horse engine. But anyways, working on it here, and we did a carb clean, and it was running great. But the problem was that the engine was vibrating really bad. They got a cracked deck, so you can see there's some tape there and whatnot. But anyways, we're missing like one of the actual mounts, because like there's a big chunk of the deck that is just gone, right? So where one of your bolt holes would normally go to mount on the engine, you just couldn't mount anything. So this machine vibrated a lot, and we cleaned the carb. It wouldn't run. They said they couldn't get it started, so we cleaned the carb, and we went and fired it up, and it ran great, and then it wouldn't start all of a sudden. So we thought, well, it's got to be a carburetor issue. So we went and we were priming it, and all sorts of fuel was coming out. So then I went and put my spark tester on the spark plug there, and it had gobs of spark. So we took the spark plug, well actually we sprayed carb cleaner into the carburetor to bypass the carb, and it still wouldn't start. So what I ended up doing was removing the spark plug, and we sprayed carb cleaner directly into the cylinder, put the spark plug back on, fired up right away, first pull, and then died. So that let me know that it wasn't getting fuel from the carburetor into the engine. But we did know that the carburetor was fine, because when I primed it, all sorts of fuel was coming out and whatnot. So here's the problem. This is the intake neck that goes inside of the engine, and that's what you're on. Well, on this kind, you know, there's a little O-ring here, and then there's two 3/8 bolts, right? And this thing basically, it just bolts on, and like this is a really simple design. You hook your linkage up. You know, like the only thing you have to hook up is your throttle right here. That goes to your little throttle plate right there, and this rod here, that goes back to your governor. The crazy thing is, for such a simple design, we couldn't understand what was wrong with, but that's as far back as it goes. But because of so much vibration, this piece here, this intake neck, guys, it cracked. And now I'm going to have to run the engine number and see what parts come up. I need a parts diagram, and I need a part number for this. The problem is there's a second half of this still inside the engine. So this is our engine model number, guys, right there. So 125K02-0609-E1. So that's your engine model number, and then that's like your code. But you should need that if you're doing anything for replacement parts on the engine itself. If you need like wheels, tires, and you know, your little spring adjusters, then you're going to want to go with your model number right here, which is a 944.366362. But like I said, because we're going to be getting parts for the engine, we needed the engine model number. And yeah, guys, I've never had this happen to me before, so I'm not sure how to get that piece out of there. And that goes all the way in to the inside of your engine, right? So this is essentially where all your air and fuel, that takes it right into the cylinder, guys. I've never had this happen to me before, so you know, it's not uncommon for me to have to go online and just Google the model number for the engine here, get a parts diagram, which is like an exploded parts view, and I can see it'll have like a numbered parts diagram where I'll be able to see this piece, you know, slid out with a dotted line going back to it, and then it'll have a parts number attached to this, and I'll be able to order this part. The only thing is, guys, I'm going to have to find out how to get that other piece out of there. Okay, so we got our pull start cover, and that's attached to our gas tank. 3 little bolts, guys. These ones right there, just the small ones, and they go here, there, up here, I think, or over there. But anyways, you take that off, and you'll be able to rotate this back. The cool design with this is that your gas tank hooks up here on that little bolt, and you can actually pivot it, you know, forward and back. So I pivoted that back, and then took the shroud off. That's a couple 3/8 bolts up here at the front, and then you have 2 at the back. There's one here, and then there's one over there, and that was pretty simple. So now that'll give me better access to this right here. So here's our intake neck, I guess you could call it. And you guys can see here, okay, so that's the broken piece. And if we can line this up, I think this goes something like that. Yeah, that looks about right. So we can see here, guys, that just from this being loose and vibrating, that broke actually. So the engine was running and it was really loose and vibrating like crazy, and because it had, again, the broken piece of the deck, so this thing was vibrating so much that this bolt here, which holds on our metal shroud, so this piece right here, and that controls your spring for your governor. But anyways, that bolt right there came out, so now the whole carburetor assembly was kind of just hanging real loose, right? So because that was hanging down, it's putting extra force on this little piece. And again, guys, this is just plastic, so it's putting a lot of extra force on this, and it's, you know, bouncing up and down, and that just snapped. And you can see that, you know, when we're starting this thing and pulling it and pulling it, well, of course, it's going to be sucking air right through that big crack. So once we took the carburetor off, well, this piece just come out with it, and that's not supposed to happen. So again, guys, we're going to take the coil off here. It's just 2 little bolts, and you'll be able to pull that off. Just make sure if you got any kill wires, like right here, you're going to want to see that. You're just going to want to unplug that just like that, and you should be good. And then we'll get these 2 bolts off, take that out, and we'll be able to replace that, no problem. Okay, so we got our coil off. It was just those 2 bolts. Now here's something that you want to take note, guys. So your coil kill wire, that comes up, it goes underneath this guy here, which is our crankcase or valve breather tube. It goes under that, and then it goes over top of this plastic intake neck. So when you put this back on, when you take this off and you go to put everything back on, make sure that this isn't underneath that, because that's how it is when I took it apart. So that's how I'm going to put it back together. Okay, so we got our 2 pieces together here. You guys can see it's a perfect fit, although we are missing a little chunk there, but that's no big deal. That probably got sucked into the engine, but well, that'll burn out and melt and probably go out the exhaust. So what I'm going to do now is just take a piece of shop towel and plug that hole, just to make sure anything else doesn't go into the engine. And I'm going to have to get a part number on this guy here and replace that, and this thing should, in theory, run excellent, because again, we had this thing, we did a carb clean, but like I said, it was missing that engine bolt, and you know, once things start to vibrate, guys, your screws come out, and then once screws come out or your bolts come out, you know, things are less sturdy and things start to vibrate even more because they're loose now. And then you get into stuff like this where, you know, one little bolt comes out and you broke that, and now you got to replace it. So just pretty simple, guys. You know, it only took maybe not even 5 minutes to get this thing all apart like how it is now. So just wanted to show you that, because I've never experienced this problem before, so it's a first for me, and I just wanted to show you guys. Okay, so this is the next day, and I got the part. It's 794305 intake manifold. This is official genuine Briggs & Stratton part, but this one's black, the other one's gray. I'm not sure that matters. I got a bunch of numbers up there, but that's the number that you guys need right there, 794305 intake manifold. And of course, it's made in Mexico. Just over here at the workbench, we got our new intake manifold tube here. We got 4 washers, and we got a gasket as well. We got this piece here. Not too sure what that's for, but we got a little note here, says installation. You figure you just bolt the thing in, but no. This is if this plastic fuel intake tube is replacing a metal one, it is necessary to install the 4 enclosed washers between the armature and the cylinder, 2 on each post. Torque fuel intake tube and armature screws to 25 inch-pounds. The washers raise the armature. This creates clearance for the coil, but does not affect ignition. So basically it's saying if this plastic tube is replacing a metal one, you need to run these washers underneath your coil. So you guys can see here, clearly we just had a plastic one, and it wasn't metal, so we shouldn't have to run any washers underneath our armature posts. we should be good to go. What I will do though is I'm going to go in here with just like an X-Acto knife or a scraper just to scrape off some of that gunk and make sure that you know, we got a clean mating surface so that I can install the new gasket and the new intake neck. Basically, it's pretty straightforward, guys. You just screw that in. You just want to make sure that, again, that surface area here is clean, because you don't want any gasket material on there when you put your new gasket on top of it, because you could get an air leak in here, which would give you a lean mixture and would cause you all sorts of air-fuel mixture problems. So your machine wouldn't run the way it's supposed to. So just looking at these two here, guys, I can see that our old one right here, they're the same length and same bolt patterns, it looks like, but this one's more rectangular, that one's more circular. Okay, so I didn't notice at first. This one, it's just like a one piece. This one, you see how there's that little angled groove? Well, this piece right there is also grooved, and it should be able to just sit right in there like that, guys. However, they don't tell you anything on this stupid piece of paper. It just talks about putting washers under your coil, and then your gasket is going to drop right over top of it just like that, and you should be good to go. Okay, so I got my 1/4 inch torque wrench here, and we got her set to 25 inch-pounds. So you can see up here, torque, you got inch-pounds, and we lined it up with the 20 right here, and then we lined it up to the 0 right there, and then we went +5, so you guys can see, as long as this focuses, we're at 20 plus the 5 right there, so that's 25 inch-pounds, and we'll torque this until it clicks. So basically I'm just going to tighten this up until my torque wrench clicks, and that's the spec that the manufacturer recommends, so that's what we're going to tighten it to. And you guys want to make sure that you loosen your torque wrench off before you put it away, because there's a spring inside of here, and if you put it away when you still have it set to like 100 inch-pounds or something like that, you could end up extending that spring, so you won't have an accurate reading, and you could end up over torquing or under torquing something, and you definitely don't want that. So always loosen off your torque wrench before storing it. Okay, so now we got our coil back on. Again, make sure you hook up the kill switch wire there, and make sure that it was routed over top of your tube there like it is now. We're ready to gap our armature air gap here. That's the gap between your coil and the magnets on your flywheel. And what you want to do is rotate your flywheel to the point where your magnets are right in front of your coil here. So you guys can see here, that's the high side, right? It's built up, you can see it, where the rest of the flywheel is just like that. You guys can clearly see that there's magnets right there. Now for this specific machine, the manufacturer, Briggs & Stratton, recommends an armature air gap of anywhere between 8 and 12 thousandths of an inch. So I'm going to be using a set of feeler gauges, and I'm going to be splitting the difference at about 10 thousandths of an inch. Now if you guys don't have a set of feeler gauges like I do, you can go ahead and use a business card. Just slip your business card in between your coil and your flywheel. Make sure your coil is pushed up against your flywheel, and then go ahead and tighten your coil bolts and then torque them to 25 inch-pounds. Okay, and once you torque your coil, you're going to go and take your panel, this big metal one, you're going to drop that on. Just make sure that you wiggle it a little bit and pull your pull start to make sure that it engages properly with the flywheel. Then go ahead and tighten up your bolt on your dipstick. Get these two front 3/8 bolts snug. Come into the back and get these two 3/8 bolts snug. Then go ahead and get your plate. And I put a little blue Loctite on these ones, guys. This 3/8 bolt here, and that one right there, just a little bit of Loctite, and you can see it's still loose, but we're gonna go ahead and tighten that up right now. Okay, and once you get the bolts on this plate here tightened up, go ahead and tighten up all of your housing bolts on the front and the back there, the ones that I told you just to get snug. And once those are done, well, we're gonna hook up our linkage first, our throttle linkage right here. We're gonna hook that onto the carburetor, then we're gonna push with our O-ring on, we're going to push our carburetor on and get the two 3/8 bolts that go in there, and we'll just get them snug for now. Okay, and like I said, guys, once you get your linkage on and your O-rings on there, go ahead fit up your carburetor, make sure everything's good, and then go ahead and get your 2 3/8 bolts into your carburetor. You don't have to worry about getting your fuel line and your fuel tank hooked up. We can do that afterwards once we get this all tightened up. And again, same with your governor spring. That just hooks up here, but we can do that afterwards. Okay, so now that our carburetor bolts are tight, I'm going to just take our spring here and clip it onto that tab right there. Okay, so now we're going to drop our fuel tank, and again, using those 3 screws right there, we're going to get them back into here, guys, and get that secure. Then we can go ahead and hook up our fuel line to our carburetor, and we'll go ahead and get our top plastic piece that goes on top of here. And don't forget your fuel line clamp, guys. Okay, now before we go any further, we're going to have to get this airbox cover installed, and we got the 3 little bolts right there. But I want to take you guys over to the workbench and show you just how the back of this works. Okay, so over here at the workbench, you guys can see that we're running 2 gaskets. Now the reasoning behind this is as the engine runs and heats up, this piece of plastic here is known to warp. Now you guys can see on this one that the primer bulb comes right through, and it's not a direct primer, so this one doesn't necessarily shoot fuel into the carburetor like some of the other models that I've shown you guys do. This one uses just air. The problem is that you guys can see there's an opening underneath those gaskets, and that flat piece on that gasket is what traps that air, and it has to run all the way to that little hole underneath this bolt right there. The problem is, guys, when you run one gasket, they always leak. So when you go to prime your machine, it literally does nothing. So in order to get away from that and not have any problems, we run dual gaskets, and we've never had a problem running 2 gaskets when you do it like this. Okay, so I just have this thing on here snug right now. I just wanted to take the time to tell you guys that when you're tightening these 2 bolts, and I mean these 2 especially, the ones that are for the carburetor, you want to go one at a time, guys. You don't want to crank up that one all the way tight and then go to that one and then go to that one, or vice versa, because what that'll do is it'll warp your plate, right? Because you're going to be tightening it, and then you're going to be tightening it, and then you're going to be tightening it, and it's going to throw it all out of whack. So again, just take your time, do one little by little, and then you should get a nice tight fit on the airbox cover here and your carburetor. Okay, and the second last thing I'm going to do is get the air filter on. We got a new air filter going in there, and I'm going to get this on before I put the top cover on. We'll tighten this up. Okay, we got our air box on now. Everything's good to go. But just to reiterate what I was saying earlier, guys, about that plate warping, you guys can see just how warped it is. So it comes over here, and then right there she starts to dip in. There's nothing I can really do about that. I could try to pull on it, but again, guys, that's just from the heat. And you know, you got a mounting point here on your carb, you got a mounting point there on your carb, you got one over here on that plate, but you don't really have anything over here. And you can see that it starts to push in, and again, that's why I use the double gaskets, guys, because those always warp. So now I'm going to go ahead and get our top red Craftsman cover onto it. That's just a couple little screws, and this thing's ready to go, guys. Okay, so here's our cover, and I'm not sure why, but they had some Robinson, just looks like deck screws or something like that. But that's what was in it, so that's what I'm going to use. Some of these covers, guys, they have a slot cut out of here so that you can slip it onto your pull start cable and then bolt it right on. This one, unfortunately, doesn't have one, so you're going to have to come up here and loosen off your nut just until you can get your pull start cable out of here. And then once you can get it out of here, you can slip it through the cover, put this back up on here, tighten that nut back up, and you should be good to go. And there you have it, guys. Something, you know, quite simple, but a little bit more complex than you might think it was. So an issue that you might have thought, well, a dirty carburetor or something like that, because of a no-start situation, turned out to be a cracked intake manifold, or intake neck, as I like to call them. And yeah, you know, pretty simple fix. Just a couple little screws here and there that you got to take off, and yeah, we got this thing all apart and put back together, and didn't take that long. The longest time was just waiting for the part to come in. So all in all, pretty easy fix. Now, like I was saying, guys, that's the first time that I've ever encountered that problem where the neck actually cracked. Pretty easy fix, like I said. Didn't take that much time, just had to wait for the part to come in, and once the part came in, we were good to go. So if you enjoyed the video, think about leaving me a like. You can click here to subscribe, click over here for one of my previous videos, and as always, guys, thanks for watching.